This is episode 10. We're here with Devin Jones, who's our level 2 in Arizona. He's really like a level 2.5 because he does all the things a level 3 should be doing, except we don't have the player base for L3. So, Devin, why don't you start it off? When did you start playing Magic?
I started initially probably around the summer of 2001, right after I graduated high school.
Awesome.
I played for maybe about a year or two. Once I got into college, it kind of tapered off. And then I took a pretty long break, but I picked it up again around, I want to say, 2011.
Wow, that is
right
a really
before,
long break.
Yeah, it was a pretty long break. It was right before Innistrad came out.
Cool.
And been playing ever since then.
Who introduced you to Magic? Was it a friend or just something you stumbled upon?
It was really just something I stumbled upon at the local game store from Missoula, Montana. They already had one game store, and I saw it. It looked fun. I got into it, and I had a lot of fun. But unfortunately, college took over, and then I just kind of forgot about it until like I said, about 2011, when I had some friends who were into Magic when I lived out in New Jersey, and they got me back into it.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, no one's ever really allowed to quit. You're only ever allowed to take breaks anyways, so you're doing just fine.
Yeah.
You have to get rid of every single card in your collection if you ever want to try to quit. Even then, it's really hard.
True.
Yeah.
So, were you playing competitive Magic when you first started, or was it more just sort of casual tabletop
It was
stuff?
very, very casual. My favorite thing to do, actually, when I very first started, was I would play with the uncards. So I think it was unhinged at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so some friends and I, we actually, bought a box each of that set, and we just made decks with that. It was a blast. Like, it was easily the most fun I've ever had in Magic. So I wasn't too much into competitive Magic until I got back into the game around Innistrad.
Cool. Okay. So what did you do competitively before? I'm assuming you weren't always a judge. You were a F&M. Were you a PT grinder? How high did your competitiveness go?
It was not that high, mostly because I was still getting into the game, so I was learning. I didn't really become a lot more competitive in regards to my Magic until pretty later on. I would say probably around like Return to Ravnica. I won the Return to Ravnica game day at my local game store out in New Jersey, and that's when I decided to become a little bit more competitive with playing.
Okay, cool. So that mat really spurred you on to...
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, and it was a lot of fun to actually win and know that I could do well. The scene out in New Jersey and the East Coast is pretty competitive, so it was a lot of fun to get that victory under my belt. Then right after that, I won a Grand Prix trial for, I want to say, Grand Prix Boston, so that helped a lot too.
Oh, awesome.
So that's pretty much when I decided that, hey, maybe I should take this game a little bit more seriously.
Cool. Well, so
Yep.
Following your competitive success, you've had a lot of judging success. PPTQ Season 1 for Arizona, like home run, right? Like Grand Slam home run?
Yeah, no, I'd say we had an amazing turnout. All across the board. The stores all ran, great events. The attendance was phenomenal.
Do you actually know the attendance numbers versus other regions' attendance numbers?
Approximately.
Okay.
From what I've seen around a lot of places, there are obviously some one-ofs like that will skew the numbers, but the average attendance nationwide, at least, was probably around 25 to 30 people.
Oh, wow.
For each PPTQ. Whereas here in Arizona, our average was probably, I would say, around 50 to 55.
Yeah, I was going to say, I played in about 6 PPTQs, and they were, all but one of them was more than 50 players.
Yeah.
Wow.
We had a grand total of 3 that were less than 52 players. That was the one in Prescott, the one in Flagstaff, and then the very last one at, I want to say, Samurai West, which also was running up against one of the AZ Magic Players Legacy tournaments.
Oh, okay.
So overall, our attendance for the PPTQs here in Arizona have been just outstanding.
So why do you think Arizona in particular had a higher PPTQ attendance than average?
From what I've seen, my biggest thought on that is because of the fact that all the different stores have been willing to work together. I created one of the first things that I did when they announced the PPTQ format is I realized that the only way this was going to be successful in Arizona is if all the stores worked together, created a schedule, and didn't overlap. So I made a calendar, just something real basic on Google Docs. It wasn't anything fancy. And, I contacted every single store that was an advanced level or higher, so advanced or advanced plus,
right.
and introduced myself, told them who I was, told them about the upcoming PPTQs, what that meant for the stores, and asked if they wanted to run one. A lot of stores did, and so I just plugged it into a calendar, said, these are the dates that are available, and, kind of ran with it. And the stores, to their credit, almost every single store, worked with me or with Brent Collinger. He's another level 2 judge down in Tucson. And, we got everything on the calendar. We had almost no overlap, and the numbers and attendance really show.
Awesome. That's a huge commitment on your part, is just like not just making a calendar for everyone, but then also saying that, from what I remember the emails, that you were willing to judge all of them too, which is 3 months straight of judging.
Yeah, unfortunately, because of the mandate that Wizards of the Coast had, where the tournament had to have a level 2 or higher head judge, it did mean that there was going to be a lot of time and effort on my part insofar as judging.
Right.
But I also understood that not only is this good for the stores, but it's also really good for the players. And so I personally had no problem doing that, because, like I said, I think that it was very good for the players. And yeah, it did turn out to be a success. A lot of positive feedback, and so when you hear that kind of stuff and you hear those compliments, it really makes the effort more than worth it.
Okay. So what so judging aside, what improvements would you suggest for the PPTQ system going forward? Even just like stuff that you could do better or stores could do better.
As far as improvements to the system, the first thing I would do is take away the level 2 judge restriction. That's the first thing I would do. Level 1 judges are probably more than capable of doing that. I can think of at least half a dozen level 1 judges in Arizona that would be able to run a fantastic event and have no issues with it. Even the bigger events that we've had with the PPTQs. So, for example, like at Desert Sky Games or Player Draw or Mana Works, the bigger ones we've had, they would have no trouble running these events. So that would be the first thing that I would do to really change that.
Do you think that they had the L2 requirement just to keep the tournaments consistent nationwide? Like, otherwise they just wanted them to be like PTQs, I guess?
I think that's part of the reason why is at least, and this is obviously my opinion, I have no fact behind it, but in my opinion, I think the reason why they made that mandate is because they wanted the tournaments to feel like the same kind of importance as the original PTQs did. And so they wanted it to seem like, okay, well, this is a very competitive tournament, and so because it's a very competitive tournament, you have to have a little bit higher rank judge there who is able to oversee the tournament, and they wanted players to feel like their actual playing experience wasn't being diminished.
Right.
I could also see them requiring a level 2 for like the first couple of seasons, just to make sure that they occur without any significant problem.
That's also probably a very good point as well. And from what I've seen, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any issues with these tournaments from a pure judge perspective, other than there not being enough level 2 judges,
right,
to judge them all. But yeah, any of the horror stories, quote unquote, that I've heard about these experiences were generally stuff that had nothing to do with judges. So.
Right. Yeah, like requiring a level 2, you can condition the player base to learn what's expected of them during these tournaments, and then after like season 2 or 3, they could probably go down to a level 1 because the player base has now been conditioned to like respect the judge's authority.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. For the most part, other than a very few minor incidences here, all of the PPTQs and all of the players that attend them have been nothing but respectful, not only to me, but more importantly to the staff that I assemble for my floor judges. They've been very, very courteous and respectful. There hasn't been any real major incidents at any of these things, so I've been very happy with that. And that's really just a testament to the players themselves, as far as having the right attitude and understanding that the judges are here to make sure this tournament runs smoothly, and we're here to assist the players, and they really do respect the work that we put in it. So that also makes all of this effort worth it.
For sure. Are you glad that regular PTQs are done with, or are you going to miss them? What are your thoughts on that?
It's kind of a little bit both, as far as
bittersweet.
A little bit bittersweet. The PTQs were nice because there was a real big emphasis on these tournaments. It was an event. People would come from all over to go to these things because they were pretty few and far between. And so now that that's gone, I don't think we're going to see the days of 180 players playing in a tournament anymore, at least not locally, outside of Grand Prix or Star City events or anything like that. But the nice thing is that it really has allowed a lot of players to kind of grind these things out. It does reward players that are willing to put in the effort, and it also is nice because it allows players that might not be able to make these tournaments have plenty of options to go. That was one of the biggest issues that Wizards really said that the change was why they made the change was because there were players that, for example, like here in Arizona, where we had at most 2 PTQs a season.
Right.
If they had to work or if there was some other obligation, then they were just out of luck. And now they have the opportunity to go to one almost every single weekend, both Saturday or Sunday, and really kind of be able to pick and choose. And so if something comes up, they can still compete and still kind of earn that slot.
It's also done a really good job of community building. A lot of the players, I've been to a lot of PPTQs, and I see a lot of the same ones, and you kind of develop friendly rivalries. Will this be the week that so and so gets their invite? Will this be the week that so and so gets theirs? And just building all the players, and everybody knows each other now. We're not segregated by store anymore. Stuff like that.
Yeah, that's definitely helped as well. It has seemed to really bring the community together in an aspect, and I think that's part of the reason why the experience in Arizona at least has been so good, is because a lot of these players, they see the same faces, both with the player base and then with the judge staff, and so you know these people, you get to know who they are rather than just some nameless person that you might see on Facebook or something like that. And that definitely helps a lot when you kind of put a person behind the name.
Right. Have you noticed any stores trying to get advanced to try to pick up PPTQs? Are there more PPTQs this season for Milwaukee than there were last season?
Not really. It seems to be pretty stable. The same stores that ran them last season will be running them this season. The only notable exception is Pop Culture Phoenix in Tempe is running one where they didn't last season.
Oh, okay.
But other than that, all the same stores are going to be running them. And so, there hasn't been any real big surprises.
And two of the formats are different, right? One there was a sealed one, and then there's a modern one coming up. Is that right?
Yes, sealed was last weekend, and from what I heard, it was a great tournament.
Yeah,
a lot of players showed up to it. Player Draw, which hosted it, is one of the best stores in the state of Arizona as far as
comfortable chairs.
Level. Yeah, comfortable chairs. Wide space is
for sure. It's a cool store.
The store staff is very good about prize support and everything like that. So they're a great place to play. I'm very glad that they decided to run a limited PPTQ format, because a lot of the players had been asking for it, and it showed. We had almost 70 players for it, and so it was nice to see. And then Pop Culture Phoenix in Tempe is going to be running Modern, which is another one that a lot of players have been asking for. And so I was really glad to see somebody be willing to kind of take that risk, to run a format that hadn't been run. So
right, that's cool. I was a little bummed that they were all standard last season, but I'm excited that they're branching out a little bit.
Yeah.
Standard's fun. Standard's always going to be fun, but it's always nice to have the option.
Oh yeah, and that's what the biggest complaint I would say from the last season is that they were all standard. Players wanted a little bit more diversity, and I can definitely understand why stores chose to run it for standard, because standard is a safe format.
Right.
It's always going to draw in players, and I think part of it was because they wanted to see how this was going to shake out, if this was going to be a success or if it was going to be a failure. And I think now that the stores have seen that the PPTQ system is, for all intents and purposes, a success, that they're willing to take a little bit more chance on some of these, with different formats besides standard. And so I think next season, so in the third season, we might see 2, maybe even 3 sealed tournaments, and 2 or 3 modern tournaments being run as well.
That'd be pretty exciting. That would be full block sealed at that point. Is that right?
Yes. Or I'm sorry, no.
Or is it Dragons and then just Fate Reforged, or in Origins?
I believe by the time the next season comes around, Origins won't rotate anything out. So
right.
So at that point in time, I believe the sealed format will be, I want to say 2, 2, and 2. So 2 Cons, 2 Fate Reforged, 2 Dragons.
Okay. Awesome. Because when you draft them, it's only going to be Dragons and Fate Reforged.
Yes, but I believe that's how the sealed was looking, but don't quote me on that. Obviously,
I won't hold you to that. That's fine.
I'm not 100% positive on that. If some stores decide they want to run that, obviously, we'll get the correct for everything. But either way, it should be a lot of fun, and I'm definitely excited to see how this plays out in the long term.
Totally agreed. As a player, I was very excited to see it be a success, and then I was excited to learn that we were doing a lot better than everyone else, because that's just the natural competitor in me, and it's cool to move forward on that.
Yeah. Well, and as a grinder, I very much appreciated not having to drive 6 to 8 hours every weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vegas and San Diego and Albuquerque are rough drives for us.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I got that a lot from a lot of players that were natural grinders for these kind of tournaments. They enjoyed the fact that they can go to all these different stores right in their backyard. So
moving from your success, this awesome project that you took on of PPTQ Season 1, what made you become a judge originally? So why did you move away from competitive Magic and into judging?
Basically, the reason why I moved into judging is I wanted to help run events. I wanted the experience to be good for players. When I first started competitive Magic out here in Phoenix and in Arizona, my local game store was Desert Sky Games, and they would always have a really good churnout, but they seemed to really not have enough people willing to run the tournament. Other than the bigger tournaments that they got, they would bring in judges, and so they would have plenty of staff for that. But just the local F&Ms, where at the time they had pretty big F&Ms, and they were having really big weekly events as well. There was a real lack of somebody who was just willing to make sure that event fired. It was firing on time. It ran smoothly, and so it made my personal experience not as much fun. And so I wanted to change that. And so I decided to essentially just, put my money where my mouth was and step up to the plate. And so that's pretty much why I became a judge. I wanted to make sure that the players had a good time playing Magic.
Awesome. Usually you hear judges that they just wanted to get more familiar with the rules, so they became rules advisors, and then they sort of got forced into judging events that they didn't want to play in. Not the way where like, oh, I want to actually help organize and run good events. That's kind of cool.
There also used to be a couple of judges who would be like, the whole if you can't play, like if you can't, those who can't do teach.
Like Eli?
Yeah, so they would, they would just judge.
Eli's such a terrible Magic player, but he's a great person.
They would become a judge just so you get a ton of free products.
Yeah. Okay.
Like for time.
When I finally became a level 2 judge, part of my responsibilities is to help foster and mentor newer judges here in the state of Arizona. And one of the big things that Wizards has done recently is they've really kind of set up a quality over quantity approach. They want good quality judges. They don't want a lot of judges. And so, in that kind of mindset and mentality, whenever I have somebody that approaches me that says, "Hey, I want to be a judge," the first thing I ask them is why. And, why do you want to be a judge? And I've had some people that have said, "Okay, well, I want to be good at the game." And I tell them, "Okay, if you want to be good at the game, then learn the rules.
Right.
Understand how tournaments, play out, understand the interactions. But that's not a good enough reason to be a judge just because I want to be better at the game. I need people that want to, help players out. And that's exactly what judges are here for. The judges are not here to penalize people for playing incorrectly.
Right.
We're not here to be the quote unquote bad guy. And that's something that I make sure that everybody knows in any sort of opening announcement, is that we are here to make sure the tournament runs smoothly and that players have a good time. We are here to help the players. And so I've been very impressed with the judges locally that have kind of stepped up to the plate and decided, hey, I want to be a judge, and they want to be a judge for the right reasons.
So how does someone go about becoming a judge if they were interested?
Well, the first thing that they do is they go to the Judge Center, which is available through the Wizards homepage, and they sign up for that. And the first thing I always tell everybody is go on there, take all of the practice tests that you can stomach. Like, take them until you can't possibly imagine taking any more. And then the next step is to pass the rules advisor test. And that's designed to make sure that players that want to become judges understand how tournaments function. They're really designed to be able to help run FNMs or like the weekly events. Once they do that, then once they feel comfortable, with taking the test, I tell them to seek me out, and I will help them, take the test to become a level 1 judge. The rules advisor test is much more difficult than the level 1 judge test.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. When I started, the rules advisor test was like, it was a test about how to read cards in situations. Like, they would ask you a question and then they'd give you a bunch of trick answers to it just to make sure you were paying attention, is what it felt like the entire test.
Yes. And I obviously let people know that all the time, that the tests are designed to be very tricky. They word things very, very poorly. They do it on purpose. So, I tell people all the time, hey, pay attention, read the questions over and over again. And so and part of the reason why they do that is because they want people that are going to be judges that are very, they're able to really kind of pay close attention to what's going on.
Right.
That they can see the details and those little kind of details like that really are very important in some of the interactions and, judge calls that you'll get. So it's very important that they can do that.
And you're going to get thrown into a lot of situations, too, where there's no context. Someone will just ask you, like, hey, I have this Huntmaster of the Fells and I didn't flip it over. What happens? And then you're like, okay, well, now I have to look at everything on the board and figure out what do we want to go back and do this? And it's like, you can't just jump into a complicated situation. There's no context. It's hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's more just being able to kind of problem solve and relate to what's going on. The first thing that I always do is, if somebody calls for a judge and it's anything more than something I can answer in 3 seconds, I take the time to say, okay, what's going on? Where are we? And just to kind of get the full story, because a lot of those things can really be broken down and fixed fairly easily, but a lot of times the players, they get very wrapped up in the game and they're very hyper-focused on what's happening, and they don't take a time to just kind of step back, see the big picture. And a lot of those times when the players do that, when I tell the players, hey, relax, now explain to me what's going on, they come to the answers themselves. Players are very smart. Players know the rules much better than most judges do.
Right.
It's just, we're here because we can talk to the players. We're here because we can, see outside the box when they're not, because they're very focused on what's going on.
Right.
Or
especially if they want something to happen the way they want it to happen.
Yes, yeah, and it's to be impartial. But Brent Kollinger, who is the guy, he tested me for my level 2, and he's been an incredible mentor. So, shout out to him.
Absolutely.
He's a great judge, and I'm very envious that he's down there in the Tucson area for you guys. So, he one of the very first things that he taught me when I was trying to become a level 2 judge and progress was that, yeah, you need to tell the players to just take a step back and figure out what's going on. There's always, you can always give somebody a time extension,
right,
but it's much more important to figure out everything that's going on and get it right the first time.
Right. Jeff, do you have any judging questions as the only non-judge in the conversation?
No, not really. So which is harder, rules interactions or personality balancing from the players?
Rules interactions. At least for me personally, I'm very good at relating to the players, speaking with the players. That's a customer service kind of background that I have,
right.
So that definitely helps a lot. It's mostly just, making sure that you get the answers correct is the big thing. So rules questions are always going to be more challenging to me than dealing with the players, because the players, for the most part, are all generally pretty good guys, and the ones that aren't, you know who they are, right away, and honestly, they seem to be able to essentially force themselves out of the game. It's nothing that the judges do. It's nothing the other players do. It's just they develop these reputations, and so they take care of themselves.
Right.
So dealing with the players is easy, and that's what makes a lot of these tournaments so nice, is that how easy it is to relate to these players, because at the end of the day, we're all Magic players. We're all nerds. Like it is who we are, and there is that kind of camaraderie there, and so it definitely helps a lot.
Is there a particular judge call that was either tricky to figure out or like the weirdest or silliest to figure out that comes to mind?
Honestly, the really tricky ones generally have nothing to do with the rules themselves. It's generally procedural. Like something has happened and I don't know what to do. The one that came to mind immediately for me is at last year's Modern States at Desert Sky Games. We had a player who, in the middle of one of the rounds, like in between rounds like 4 and 5 or so, they found a card on the ground.
Oh, I remember this.
Yes, yeah. It was in a black sleeve,
mm-hmm.
And so we tried very hard to figure out who this card belongs to.
Right, I remember you were like, who's got black sleeves on their deck?
Yes, yeah, and unfortunately it was a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we had people count their decks, make sure that they had the correct answer, or the correct number of cards. And the player whose card it belonged to, when they counted their deck, they had 60 cards. However, the player registered a 61 card deck. And his deck list on his deck sheet was completely correct. So there was nothing wrong. It's just he didn't even realize that there were 61 cards in his deck. And so we didn't catch this until halfway into the round. So then at that point in time, we have to figure out, well, what do we do? Right. And I can tell you right now, none of the rules in the IPR or Magic's official rules tell you how to deal with a situation like that. And so it's things like that are the trickiest. It's so something happened here, how do I deal with it? And you really just try and look over the rules and then just make your best judgment.
Right, because they'll have like spirit of the rules advice in there where it's like, okay, you have to balance integrity of the tournament and also good player experience for not only the person who has the now misregistered deck, but then their opponent as well, who thinks that they should get a free win because their opponent presented an illegal deck.
Yeah, and the player that had this happen to him, he's been a member of the Magic community for a long time. I know he's a very good guy. It's not like he was trying to gain an advantage. Right. If anything, it's a disadvantage for him.
For sure.
But at the same point in time, there are rules. You still have to enforce the tournament. You have to make sure to, like you said, maintain the integrity of the tournament. And so it's definitely a very awkward balance. To be fair, Wizards has done a good job insofar as giving the head judge of the tournament a lot more leeway and flexibility to do things like, for example, downgrade penalties and whatnot for awkward situations like that, instead of just like a hard, fast, this is the penalty, deal with it.
Right.
So that has helped deal with a lot of things, the awkwardness of it, but there's still a lot of very tricky things that can happen. As far as actual rules calls, the trickiest ones are always limited tournaments, always, because when you play standard, you know what's going to happen with 99% of the decks. They're all the same cards, so even the most tricky of interactions, you're still relatively sure what's going to happen. With limited, you're playing with these cards that will never see standard play, and so very unique interactions happen that you've never had to deal with before, and then you have to figure it out. So those are always the trickiest ones, which is why, from a judge perspective, limited tournaments are the worst. Just the worst. Like, I know players
they take longer, and they're more complicated.
They are more complicated. They take longer. There's always issues with deck registrations. My favorite story is the ManaWorks, their last limited PTQ, like official PTQ. There was 86 players, I believe, for it, and going into round 1, I had to unfortunately give out 15 game losses for improper deck registration, where players they didn't register their pool correctly, and unfortunately it is a game loss, and it sucks, but it is what it is. And unfortunately, because it was a very competitive tournament and it's a PTQ, game losses are very, very important and big deals to the players, so every single one of them appealed, which they have the right to do, and they are perfectly in their right to do so. So unfortunately, we had people with 30-minute time extensions in round 1.
On top of the hour 20 for registering and passing and verifying.
Yes. I always try to tell the people sitting around me, like, we all know how to count, we all know how to read and write, so just take your time and count and read and write.
Yes. And that's the best way to do it, is just take your time and be thorough and don't rush yourself. And that works with both limited or constructed tournaments. When people fill out their deck lists and they'll accidentally put the wrong number or they forget a card, it's one of those things where if you had just taken the time to prepare, then it wouldn't be a problem.
Right. So season 3, we're going to try to get all the stores to do limited PPTQs. Is that what you're advocating?
I can find judges for probably 1 or 2 of them, and after that, the stores will have to figure out some other way to run these tournaments.
Fair enough.
I am very happy to say that Nathan Cardinell has passed his level 2 judge.
Awesome.
So we do have another level 2 judge here in the state of Arizona, and so that definitely has helped, and it will help in the future. He's a very valuable resource. He's probably one of the better people in the state of Arizona when it comes to the actual rules of the game. So he's definitely a very valuable asset, and so that'll definitely help going forward.
For sure, it'll help you definitely. Like, you'll actually get weekends now.
Yeah, I mean, I love judging. I don't want it to seem like I don't. If I didn't, I wouldn't have gone through the effort of making sure all this stuff happens and tournaments fire the way they do, because I really do enjoy it. And it's nice seeing the players get enjoyment out of it. It's nice when players come up and tell me, like, hey, these tournaments always run smooth and we enjoy it and we're having a great time, and I just want to thank you for that. That kind of stuff is what really makes the whole experience worth it. The stores all around the valley are great, and they always take very good care of me and my staff for these tournaments, so I'm never concerned about that.
Right.
But when we judge these tournaments, the first thing in our minds, at least for me personally, is to make this tournament enjoyable for the players. The stores, they'll make their money, they'll get the players to the door. I'm not as concerned about that as much as I am, like I said, making sure that the players have a good time. And from all the feedback that I've gotten from season 1, that's been the case, and I'm very, very glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's been praised pretty much all around. So where can people find you coming up? Obviously PPTQs. You said 2 this weekend, right?
Yes, there's one tomorrow, which will be March 7th at Desert Sky Games, and then March 8th is going to be in
Prescott
at Game On, not to be confused with Prescott Valley. And then the cool thing is that both those tournaments are going to have Grand Prix trials for Grand Prix Las Vegas in the afternoon.
Oh yeah, so, those are coming up. Cool.
Yes, so a lot of the stores are starting to do that, and it's worked really well in the past. Desert Sky Games did it their first time when they had their very first PPTQ. Players loved it because it gives players who don't do very well in the PPTQ, something to do.
Right.
So, for example, if players are traveling out of town and say, hey, my buddy is doing really well, but I'm, 0-3, I'll just drop from this tournament, go play in this GPT, and earn some Planeswalker points, or in this case, maybe earn a couple buys for what's probably going to be the largest Magic tournament that we've ever seen. So it's definitely nice, and the players seem to like it. So there's quite a few other stores that are going to be doing that. So if players out there that are interested in the GPTs for GP Las Vegas, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for them to play.
Cool. Do you have any questions? Last question, Jeff?
I do not.
Any questions for us, Devin?
What made you guys decide to do this podcast?
Well, we were doing it as part of a store. So like I worked at Amazing Discoveries, and I was doing it because I wasn't playing at all. I was just judging events and running them. So it kept me grounded for pre-releases, and I got to learn new cards, and that's why I started doing it.
Yeah. Well, and part of the reason we originally started doing it was we would just get together and hang out and talk about Magic.
Right.
So we decided, why don't we just record it, and then if other people want to sit around and listen to us talk about Magic, they can.
And the first really bad episodes that are poor quality, and hopefully you can't find them anywhere on the internet, are the story, right? We read the book. The Theros book. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was like a book club, but we recorded it. I can't remember how we recorded it, but it was one of the worst quality videos I think I've ever seen.
Didn't we
in the last decade
Didn't we
so.
duct tape a cell phone to a stand
right.
and record sound on the other cell phone or
yes,
something?
That sounds right.
Well, everybody has to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
So, when you guys are viral hits out there and all your subscribers, you can say, hey, we remember our humble roots out there.
I mean, it's really good for the community, too. I'm really, really big on community building, so I wanted to have an outlet where I can put information out there. People might watch our videos and be like, hey, I know those two guys, so maybe I'll listen to what they have to say. And then...
Well, Doug Byers stole your idea, right?
He did.
So one of the designers for Magic actually took Jeff's Back to the Future reference for Sarkhan and Zergo Home Smasher.
Yeah, so I
uncredited.
I claimed that Zergo was going to be the Biff Tannen of Tarkir. And today during the PAX panel, he quoted me by saying that Zergo was the Biff Tannen of the Tarkir story.
Yeah, I remember that. I watched the PAX panel today, and
cool.
it was definitely very interesting. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen in Magic coming up.
It's for
one
sure.
One of the things that I've really enjoyed about this set and going into Dragon's Tarkir is the writing for the lore with the Uncharted Realms has been phenomenal, like head and shoulders above some of the other ones in the past.
Right.
And it's definitely been a really good experience. And so I know they're focusing a lot more on the story behind Magic the Gathering and the lore, trying to get players interested in that.
Well, that's what Origins is they're restarting the story essentially.
Yeah.
With the,
they're
centralizing it, I should say.
Yeah, and telling people about the past and what's all their favorite characters, what's going on with them.
Right.
So it's definitely been a really nice thing for them to do, and so that's definitely helped a lot.
Agreed.
Yep.
Cool. Well, there's some exciting things coming up for Magic. People can find you at any PPTQ in Arizona, I'm assuming. Even if you're not there, you're there in spirit because you've organized it in some way, or send a judge there, or...
And if they, if any of them ever need me, I'm more than willing to go, even if I'm not judging for some strange reason. But yeah, I'm very, very easily accessible, whether it's on the PPTQs or social media or anything like that. So if anybody ever has any sort of questions about this kind of stuff, I'm more than willing to talk to players.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us, Devin.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate you guys. Oh,
we get to beef up the slogan this week.
Oh, it's true, we do.
Yeah, because normally there's always a game with 2, but this week there's even more of a game with 3 in the queue.
It's a multiplayer game.
It is.
All the cards values all change.
They do.
Awesome. Thank you, Devin.
thank you guys very much.
Yeah, take care. Have a good evening.